Let us pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, send forth, we beseech thee, upon thy servants who bear office in this country, the spirit of charity and justice, that they may in all things walk before thee with a steadfast purpose, and serve in their several offices, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Most gracious God, author of all goodness, we beseech thee for the Parliament of Barbados, especially the Senate at this time assembled, that thou wouldst be pleased to prosper and direct all their counsels to the acknowledgement of thy glory, the good of thy church, and the welfare of thy people, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And let us say together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And may the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and always. Amen.
A message from Her Excellency the Governor General. Announcements by Your Honor the President.
Under announcements, I want to mention the letter from Moore, but
Yes, Your
I'd have to think of them, so I say for it, yes. By His Honor the President, we are the announcement.
announcement. So you can do this and you can also do the minutes.
Yes.
Something else.
Yeah.
You can do it before.
In terms of the order of business, we are now under the item announcements by His Honor the President. And I'm to advise that the minutes of the last meeting are not yet available, so there can be no confirmation, and we are seeking to have them deferred. They're not yet available. I have too a letter of absence dated the 22nd of October 2018, from Senator Tony Moore, and it reads as follows. Dear Mr. President, I write seeking permission to have my absence from the Honourable Senate excused for the period 22nd of October to 9th of November 2018. I shall be off island on business relating to the governing body of the International Labour Organization during this time. Many thanks for your gracious entertainment of my requests. There is also communication from Senator Rudy Grant that he will be late. Hope to join us later today. What else on the announcement? Anything else? I think that. I think
Presentation
Senator
of
Lucille Moore too has also indicated that she will be late for today's session. Maybe in another hour or less she should be joining us.
presentation of petitions, presentation of papers, reports from select committees.
Wait. The President commanded to lay the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plans.
Reports from select committees, questions to ministers, requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations, motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate, and moved by a minister.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders number 22-1 and 45-2 in order to facilitate us debating a number of bills in all stages today.
It's been moved that standing orders 22-1 and 45-2 be suspended for the balance of today's hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to rise on a point of privilege at this point. Sir, I spoke with the leader of the government business a few minutes ago concerning the matters that he wanted to debate. I am seeing them for the first time at 3 o'clock this morning. They came into my inbox at 10:47. That is unfair, it is unreasonable, and it should not be allowed, sir. You must protect the minority from the government's excesses, sir. I am calling upon you, sir. You must protect us from this and use your power to stop me from doing this. You can't. I am not that bright that I can look at someone at 3 o'clock in the morning, come back here and talk all over my face today. I am not doing it. It is unfair.
Any others want to express their views? The question is that standing orders 22-1 and 45-2 be suspended for the balance of today's proceedings. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no.
No, fine.
The division has been called for.
You already want to do it.
Clerk, are you ready to help us with the division?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get your names up.
That's all we have to do. And the other deputy clerk is ill. He's writing in the names.
So you got to do it on paper.
Senator Walcott. Senator McConney. Senator Dr. Springer. Senator Holder. Senator Cummins. Senator Haynes. Senator Sands. Senator Franklin.
No.
Senator Drake. Senator Biggins. Senator Boyce.
Nay.
Senator Maxwell.
No.
Senator Maynard. Senator Nurse. His Honor Senator Greenwich. Eight.
Sir, I'm going to object to that one.
Can't object, no, sir.
I can't object.
Vote is being taken.
Sir, when the count was when the motion was moved, you had a certain number of senators present, and at the stage when the voting goes on, sir, and you
Point
have
of
already.
order, Mr. Chairman.
Let me make my points now.
Vote is being taken. You cannot speak now.
Please, Senator Franklin, give him the opportunity
Right.
to be heard.
I would like, sir, for it to be made clear by the rules of this chamber whether or not that could have happened, sir.
I rely on the clerk to draw my attention to the relevant standing order. If there's one dealing with that, though I'm inclined to rule that before the voting was complete, she had taken her seat and her vote was no. Before the exercise was completed, she was in her seat and she voted no. Do you have? Remember that before the vote was taken, the bell was rung, and the reason for that is to ensure that all those who are in the precinct are alerted and can take their seat. Before the voting was completed, she had taken her seat, and her vote was validly, in my judgment, and my ruling recorded. That is the ruling of the chair. She was in her seat before the voting was completed. It's validly being recorded. What is the result, sir, Mr. Clerk?
President, 8 senators voted in favor of the motion.
Hear you well, please.
8 senators
8 senators.
voted in favor of the motion. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 voted against.
He got to ask his vote, though. He has his voting cast. Huh? No, you're gonna lose it. You're gonna lose everyone who's born in here.
have a casting vote in this matter, and I propose to exercise it in favor of the debate continuing as was proposed on matters which we had noticed only in the early hours of the morning. The reason for my supporting or doing them today is that they are really not new. They are related to the debt restructuring. The only one that is outside of that is the dematerialization of government securities and other matters related thereto. And that really relates to having the securities in digital form rather than in paper, which is consistent with the era in which we live. So I do not think that I'm really seriously or at all disadvantaging senators, since the matters are all related to the debt restructuring, which we have already addressed a week ago. In the circumstances and for the reasons given, I exercise my casting vote in favor of the proposal that we proceed with the suspension of the standing orders earlier indicated for the balance of today's proceeding. Thank you.
Introduction of bills.
Mr. President, I beg to lay the National Insurance and Social Security Amendment and Validation Bill 2018.
Notice.
To give notice, sorry. I beg to give notice of the National Insurance and Social Security Amendment and Validation Bill 2018. I beg to give notice of the Dematerialization of Government Securities Bill 2018. I beg to give notice of the Local Loans Amendment Bill 2018. I beg to give notice of the Treasury Bills and Tax Certificates Amendment Bill 2018. And I beg to give notice to the Local Loans Amendment Number 2 Bill 2018. I also beg to give notice of the resolution to take note of the Green Paper on Planning Law Reform. No. Mr. President, I beg to move the first reading of the National Insurance and Social Security Amendment and Validation Bill 2018. I beg to move the first reading of the Dematerialization of Government Securities Bill 2018. I beg to move the first reading of the Local Loans Amendment Bill 2018. I beg to move the first reading of the Savings Bonds Amendment Bill 2018. I beg to move the first reading of the Treasury Bills and Tax Certificate Amendment Bill 2018. And I beg to move the first reading of the Local Loans Amendment Number 2 Bill 2018. Yeah.
Public business.
Public business.
Order number 7, sir.
Your continue.
In the name of the
Fear Wiggins want to go.
Honourable Leader of the Senate,
Fear Wiggins.
to resume the debate on the second reading of the Debt Holder Approval of Debt Restructuring Bill 2018.
Debt restructuring. Yeah.
We're continuing the debt restructuring debate. Anyone interested in contributing? Senator Wiggins, I recognize you.
Good morning, Mr. President. First, let me congratulate you on your elevation to the prestigious post in this chamber, and also to congratulate my colleague senators. I'm grateful for the opportunity to make a short contribution to the debt restructure debate. First of all, I want to compliment the government for the swiftness in which it has approached the economic difficulties confronting the country, which by their very nature demanded urgent attention. However, we must recognize the changed circumstances that have brought us to this juncture. Traditional sugar production has not been a viable option for some time, and various attempts to reorient the industry have gone nowhere. Tourism and international business and financial services, our main foreign exchange earners, are simply not as competitive as they used to be. Just as we are now faced with climate change, our comfort zone in the financial services sector has been undermined with the changes in Canadian law, which have removed the advantage of doing business in Barbados. This country has also been negatively impacted by allegations that it is a tax haven. How is it that Barbados can be so branded when we hear absolutely nothing about jurisdictions like Nevada in the United States or even Switzerland that are in the same line of business? The answer is abundantly clear. Might is right and ignorance is ignorance. The tourism sector has been underperforming in the recent past. It has been beset from competition from lower-cost destinations in Europe, Central America, and the Caribbean. Barbados is a mature destination, and as a result, much of its infrastructure is old and its attractions need upgrading. Mr. President, I'm making these remarks about the leading productive sectors to underscore the point that the difficulties we now faced were not entirely of our own making. However, I do believe that we have a lot more leeway in the way we craft our responses to those difficulties. There have been many arguments that are worthy of considerations in the process of this debt restructuring exercise, in which form it should take. If we can use one dictionary meaning of restructuring, it says, bringing about a drastic or fundamental internal change that alters the relationships between different components or elements of an organization or system. Sir, there is no doubt that this definition aptly describes the debt restructuring exercise that is currently unfolding in Barbados. But the question remains as to whether we have crafted the appropriate response or model. What we have here can be seen as a partial debt restructure. If it were an individual covering his or her own personal debt, that individual would get one loan to eliminate the debt, and he or she would still have money left over to spend on something else. The national debt of Barbados is about $1 billion, and the debt to GDP is about 157%. So if the government were...
That is extremely erroneous, Mr. President. It is more like the central government debt is more like 15 billion, and the arrears locally is 1.9 million. So it's more like 1.9 billion, more like 17 billion, and not 1 billion.
Thank you, sir. So if the government were carrying out a full restructuring, the funds that should be sought from external forces should eliminate the old combined debt. We know for sure that the inflows from the IMF amount to 290 million, and we have heard that it will unlock inflows from other multilateral institutions. However, there's no certainty that the amounts mentioned or the time frame that has been involved. Sir, it may be argued that the loan from the IMF is mainly to rebuild the foreign reserves. But even so, with reserves at the end of May amounting to 220 million, and only 49 million of the IMF loan was immediately available, it does not provide much room for shoring up the reserves. If I'm not mistaken, the drawdowns will occur every 6 months, subject to satisfactory performance on a number of criteria. The direct impact of this restructuring plan on pensioners has been a very topical issue. Their plight has been caught up unexpectedly and undeservedly in this melee, and some would call it collateral damage. To give an example, a pensioner who has accumulated about $500,000, largely by way of gratuity, and bought government paper yielding a 6% return, would receive $30,000 per annum or $2,500 per month. In the new exchange arrangement, given the reduced interest rates, the pensioner will receive $5,000 per annum and will be receiving less money and have to pay more for electricity, water, insurance, and health services. So all of a sudden, through no fault of their own, pensioners will experience a whole lot of disruption, and that is just simply not right, sir. This policy has implications to transcend generations. If this pensioner has made a commitment to help support his or her grandchildren, $500 plus per month is nothing, and as the saying goes, everything just fall down, gone through the eddies. So that person is severely disadvantaged. The terms of the replacement paper, the 15-year amortized basis, also deserve a comment. For every payment cycle, there's a portion of principal and interest being paid, whereas previously the principal would still have been in place at the end of the period. Accordingly, since payment of principal takes place on the reducing balance, as the years progress, the payments will get smaller and smaller until some cases they become really insignificant. This is made worse by the fact that because of inflation, a sum of money 15 years from now would yield nothing because of the time value of money. Sir, all through the years, the country has been made to understand that government paper was a very safe investment. But this whole debt restructuring plan has fractured that thought, and many people who will come into money by one form or another will no longer buy that government paper. This action has caused a severe impact on the banking and financial institutions. And many of you would have heard in the media this week that one commercial bank is writing down exorbitant losses because of the reduced interest rates from the government paper. And it will have a domino effect throughout the economy, because when you see banks writing off all these loans and all this interest and so on, they will pass on more of this hardship, as it were, on customers. So the domino effect has started. And to me, this whole debt restructuring process has reminded me about Brexit, where a decision was taken without full consideration of the full impact on all the sectors of the economy. So everything is now unfolding. Mr. President, it begs the question whether enough thought was in fact available to discuss all the viable options. And this has come about because it seems as though it was a rush to do this thing. It was a rush to get the whole debt restructuring thing in place. And because of that, I believe that there was not a lot of consultation so that you would get opinions from all sources in order to arrive at this decision that they have come to. But As I said, government paper was sacred, and it is no longer sacred. Sir, I want to close by saying, giving compliments to certain persons. And as I spoke to a senator earlier, I have just returned home, and I want to give a lot of credit to the Barbados Port Authority. In under a week, my whole container with personal effects were cleared and at my house in a week. And, you know, we criticize people when there's criticism, and I believe in praising people when they are to be praised. So I want to give thanks to the Barbados Port Authority and to pay compliments to my Honourable Senator Lisa Cummins. Also, I want to thank and praise the broker locally, Corlett Trading, who has done exceptionally well in getting all my personal effects cleared so that I could have at least some clothes to wear to the Senate today. Also, before closing, I would like to compliment my former boss, Senator Walcott, who is doing an outstanding job and a very professional job, I can tell you, as Minister of Foreign Affairs. As I said, he was my boss, so I know of what I speak. And I'm speaking from a professional standpoint. He's doing an excellent job. And from what I heard the Prime Minister said, the economy is going to be rebuilt on the plank of foreign affairs, and we have an excellent minister in which to continue that plank on. And for that, Senator Walker, I thank you very much, and I wish you all the best, and may God continue to bless you as you do your job well. So, Mr. President, with those few words, I'm obliged to you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. President. I rise to lend support to this bill. In last session, Senator Haynes gave us a roadmap as to how we got to this point that we're at. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that Barbados has found itself at a very critical and precarious juncture in its history, where very important and hard financial decisions had to be made in order to save this country. The economic landscape of this country remains very challenging, and so does the social landscape. And this is because in the past decade, from 2008 to 2018, this country has only managed a paltry negative 0.5% growth. It has amassed a large fiscal deficit, averaging about 7% of GDP, and debt has skyrocketed from 80% to an unsustainable 175% of GDP. In addition to this, we have lost our global competitiveness, and we have also lost access to global markets, capital markets, as a direct result of our 22 downgrades by rating agencies, who we were told at the time didn't matter. We cannot be downgraded as a people. This is what we were told. But we have come to realize that they do matter. They matter in a significant way. And given these reasons, this administration was forced to move post-haste, to move quickly. As alluded to by Senator Wiggins, we had to move quickly and to come up with a plan or economic recovery and transformation program in order to stymie this deterioration. And though you may say that it was rushed, and I've heard it on that side that it was rushed, The fact is, this plan is 10 years behind time. 10 years behind time. And if there's a rush job, and if I'm going to refer to a rush job, the only persons are the naysayers and those on the other side who were quick to rush to judgment without giving this program the opportunity to work. I think that was a rush job. Mr. President, the government of Barbados is trying to create a path towards stability. A path and a strategy that will call for what I refer to as fiscal or financial patriotism on the part of our people. As a result, the Prime Minister has reached out to a number of different groups to help shoulder the burden, and she has been given the green light by these special groups because they recognize the importance of what we are doing. And the least that we can do as patriotic Barbadians is to give this program a chance to work. Because I'm sure that these sacrifices will pay off in the long term. Now, for those persons who are quick to criticize this bill, but who have never offered an alternative, my question to you is simple. What do you believe will happen if this program doesn't work, if this program goes off track? But let me tell you what I believe will happen. I believe the Extended Fund Facility, the EFF, that's supported by the IMF, if it's allowed to go off track, it will signal to the international community, and more importantly, our developmental partners, that we are not ready. We're not willing. We do not have the fortitude to put the necessary reforms in place to ensure that we are fit for purpose, that we are ready for business, that we are open for investment. What will happen is that the support of those developmental partners will be withdrawn. I'm talking about IDB, CDB, partners who have pledged upwards to $1 billion in support for this program, as a result of this program, because this program signals that we are ready. And if the IMF is confident, shows confidence in us, these other financial institutions will show confidence. And they are showing that confidence because of the IMF, because we were supported by the IMF. Additionally, we may find ourselves in a situation where the World Bank may halt engagements with Barbados. And the reality of it is that we need the assistance. We need this assistance if we are to attract the type of investment that we're going to need in this country going forward. The Prime Minister had indicated that the road is not going to be an easy one. It's going to be a long journey. I think were her words, to be exact. A long journey. Because this is a complex problem that is going to call for a complex solution. It's no easy fix. We didn't get here overnight. It took us a long time to get here. I want to believe, and I believe strongly, that it will not take us as long to get out of it. But we must understand that it's going to be a long journey, and there's going to be some pain and some sacrifice along the way. As a country, we are going to have to make some comprehensive economic reforms as well. And I believe this has started. And we will soon see the fruits of our labor. Now, I've also jotted down a number of other points that I think may result if this program is allowed to go off track, if this program is stymied. And one point is that the financing for many of our programs, including our infrastructural development, would be impacted. And I'm talking about infrastructure development that impacts, and not only infrastructure development, but some of our other mission critical issues that we would have highlighted in our manifesto. And these include simple everyday things like having enough garbage trucks on the road to pick up our garbage. Right now we're managing a picker every 2 weeks or so. Having enough buses on our roads to take home more people. Just recently I saw on social media that persons are waiting 5 hours in the bus stand. My people, persons from St. Andrew, are waiting 5 hours in the bus stand for a bus. And these are the types of programs that we intend to address with the funds that we expect to accrue from this program. Another thing that may result if this program is not allowed to go forward is that the private sector may cease investment. As it is, they are driven by the confidence shown by the IMF. They are driven by that confidence that the IMF has shown in us is what is a signal to the private sector to invest in Barbados. If we allow that to go off track, then that investment will be withdrawn. And when we take into account that we have had only negative growth in the last decade, and we have lost our competitive edge, and is now only third to Haiti as having the highest debt to GDP ratio in the world, or at least in the Western Hemisphere. We have a country like Barbados that was heralded as the model for social and economic development in the Western Hemisphere in the Caribbean, for sure. Now being compared to the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. We have lost every single gain that we have accrued over the past 50 years. We've lost a lot of that in the last 10 years. Senator Wiggins alluded to the fact that the banks, they're under a significant amount of pressure. And if this plan doesn't work, that pressure would increase. They would no longer be able to finance or be willing to finance many of government's programs or many of the programs, but any of the SOEs, state-owned entities. They will withdraw their support as well. And within a few months, we'll be back to where we began, where we were 4 months ago. Additionally, there's a clause for that if the program doesn't work, that we have to pay back a 5% to the program, early debt repayment, which would further put this country under tremendous pressure, financial strain. And we will be forced to go back to the IMF or to the international community, but this time with hands outstretched and begging. Not a situation where we could present them with a program that we believe can work, but we'll be begging and we will have to take what we get. And if we have to go to the IMF, that will come with certain conditionalities, as we all know, and perhaps the cuts in the public sector will be deeper. So if we think that is bad now, it could potentially get worse if we do anything to block this program. To make a long story short, the economy of Barbados will implode at a tremendous rate because it will be starved of investment, both private and public investment. And we, as Barbadians, do not want that. This program, the BERT program that persons would have tried to make light of, what that program does, it seeks to accelerate growth by focusing on attracting new investment into Barbados, in new investment areas. And some of these areas are areas such as renewable energy sector, the creative and artistic industries, education and health services, agro-industries, technology and research, and the international business sector. These are the areas where we need some investment, and desperately. But in order to have this, to get this investment, we have to boost confidence in our economy. And we are doing that through the restructuring of our economy and a number of institutional changes that you would have seen, you've seen they have started. As I close, I want to, at this time, commend those persons, especially pensioners, who are shouldering a significant amount of this burden. I think as we enter the month of November, we celebrate 52 years of nationhood. I think I should commend these persons for their, as I said, their fiscal patriotism. Persons who look beyond their own self-interest. Those 99% of persons who agree to the offer look beyond their own self-interest for the greater good, because they realize that what they were doing, or what they are doing, is in fact is rescuing this country, so their grandchildren and their children will not have this burden to carry. And I want to commend those persons as true unsung heroes as we move into the month of independence. And I'm sure that I speak for all of my colleagues on this side when I say that we truly appreciate what they are doing for us as a country. We truly appreciate the sacrifices that they have taken for us. And that we commend them on so doing. With these few words, Mr. President, I'm obliged.
Next recognized British.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. President, and giving me the opportunity to speak in support of this debt restructuring bill. I begin by saying, sir, that this Mayor Mortley-led administration has decided that debt restructuring is indeed the way to go if we want to save Barbados from the perilous situation it now finds itself. And in effect, what we have done is to sell our own program to the IMF. This is our homegrown program. Needless to say, Mr. President, we could not continue with the policies of the last administration. We just could not. That was an administration which was characterized by high taxes, lots of taxation, by depleting the NIS funds, characterized by printing of money, an administration which was not even speaking to Barbadians. We could not continue with those policies. Because as you know, Mr. President, if you continue to use the same solutions for the same problems, you are going to get the same results. Mr. President, we are therefore telling Barbadians to help us to take this country out of the mess. This is a country, sir, which is now on life support. Our financial needs are many. Our financial needs are urgent. And we are begging Barbadians to help us play your part. Help us to restructure this economy. We are pleading with the Barbadians who had invested in government paper, in debentures, in bonds, to accept payment in a form which is perhaps more favorable to government than it is to them, the investors. Although we have to say that eventually everybody will get back everything to which they are entitled, but not at the precise time of payment that it is due. And we are pleading them to make a personal sacrifice for the greater good. Many Barbadians, as you've just heard, have agreed to our request for their cooperation. We held meetings with the social partnership, and they understand the problems which face this country. Although I know some people may not be too pleased with how Labour was represented at that social partnership. I know it was C2SAB, the Barbados Workers Union, and the NUPW. Everybody wouldn't be too pleased with that composition of Labour at this social partnership table. Now, I come into you, affair. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, in politics, no matter what decision you take, it could be the most sensible decision in the world. No matter what decision you take, you are not going to please everybody. Sometimes you see a decision being taken, and you say to yourself, aha, nobody will criticize this. What is there in this to criticize? And yet the criticism comes. I remember, sir, I'm not going to shy away from it, when the Democratic Labour Party introduced free secondary education to Barbados, some Barbados Labour Party supporters criticized that. And you ask, what is there to criticize in it? Even when, quite recently, Prime Minister Thompson introduced free school bus fares, some Barbados Labour Party supporters criticized that too. You said, but what was there to criticize? You know, when we introduced the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, some of the Democratic Labour Party supporters criticized it. You know, when we built the ABC Highway and started to build the ABC Highway, Democratic Labour Party supporters criticized it. You know, and God rest him in his grave, and with all respect to Senator Tate, I was in the other place when I heard he got up and he said, I was perhaps the biggest critic of the ABC Highway. And he said, but now I reflect on it, I wonder how Barbados could have done without it. And that happens, he said, that is the nature of politics. That is the nature of politics. You know, when a few months ago, we said that the students at the University of West Indies will now have their tuition fee paid once again. That was criticized again. Sometimes you wonder what there is to criticize. and yet you will get criticism. We can't borrow a cent on the international market. We can't buy a garbage truck, we are told. We can't buy a transport board bus, we are told. Senator Franklin admitted that the only body would lend us money is the IMF. There's absolutely no alternative for us to deal with the situation that we are in. Whether or not the BLP, the DLP, the UPP, whatever P, had won the last election, there would have been no alternative for that government but to approach the IMF for assistance. It was a Hobson's choice. This or none. You had no wiggle room at all. A deeper hole. That's the only alternative. And yet people would criticize us for going to the IMF. This is the nature of our adversarial politics. It's a system we have that very often does more harm for the country than good. That is the nature of politics. As I said, it was a Hobson's choice. I listen to people like Shane Lowe, who is the president of the Economic Society of Barbados. And he said too, there was no alternative, there was no other choice. I was in here last week when I heard Senator Haynes say that one of the international lending agencies called the Barbados paper dodgy Bajan junk. That is the situation that we're in. Dodgy, nobody wants. There was one other choice we had. This is the only other choice we had. 30 Barbados dollars to $1 US. That was the only other choice we had. A devaluation. That was the only other choice. And I lived in Jamaica. I know what 30 Jamaican dollars meant to $1 US. Today is 135 to 1. This is what Barbados was on the track for. And you will still get people coming to criticize this government for trying to take us out of the miry clay. You will still get people trying to do that. You know, I also reminisce when last week, when I heard some speeches from the floor of this House. It reminded me of when I was teaching in the Cayman Islands. I had a massive class of four students. They were doing A-level literature. And we were doing Paradise Lost. There came a point in that play where, well, you don't even know how to put this. The devil was virtually taking over. Paradise Lost, it was taken over from God in the play. And the question was asked by me as to who is the most attractive character in the play now. Who would you want to be if you were the actor? And there was an argument among the five of us, and eventually I said, look, go home, take a week and a half, write the essay and come back. And when the essay came back, I had two persons. One argued very strongly, God. The other argued very strongly, the devil. Both of them got A's. I marked very hard. Both of them got A's. And then there was another argument. How could two people saying opposites, how could they both get A's, and how could you give them A's? I said, it is the argument. It's the level of the argument. And why do I say that? what relevance does that have to this exercise this morning? I listened to speeches last week. I listened to Senator Haynes, and I would give her an A for her presentation. Excellent. Top class. Top class. I listened to Senator Drake's. I gave her an A too. Top class. Top class. You know, I can tell you now, she gave us some blows, Senator Drake's, but she did it in a way that she was still a patriot. At the end of the day, she sounded as though she wanted to help. She was that good. And I said, I told her last week I enjoyed her presentation and how good it was. First thing I did this morning when I got in here, tell her the same thing. I was so impressed with her presentation. But there was another speech from another person. A person who has a lot of personal interest to serve. A person who has a lot of personal fish to fry. A speech, clearly, a lot of showmanship, acting, self-promotion. A speech wrapped up in himself. I understand that he commended me very highly over the weekend for doing the work of 3 ministers when I had the ministry. 4 ministers, yes. I take the commendation. I take the compliment. I'm not returning it. No, not at all. And you know, he called government's effort to resuscitate this economy the Ernie and Bert show. Ernie and Bert show. He said, sir, I have the note here. We were not breaking eggs to make the omelette. We were killing the fowl. Yeah, very, very entertaining. Very entertaining. He said this recovery was being led by Ernie Maskell and Bert Prasad. Oh yes. And I want to say as nicely as I can on the floor of the Senate this morning that when it comes to economic and financial matters, that person cannot untie the shoelaces of people like Dr. Clyde Maskell, Dr. Prasad, or Dr. Kevin Greenwich. You will never live long enough, Mr. Speaker, to see that person untie the shoelaces of those 3 persons. He can't do it. He can't match them. Neither form, substance, nothing. And you know, Mr. Speaker, he came over, Mr. Speaker, as being the biggest financial expert in this country of ours. He had the answer for everything. It is clear, sir. I interpret it that if he was prime minister, this country would not have a single problem at all. He would solve all in the twinkling of an eye. He came over as the biggest constitutional expert this country has ever seen. In fact, some of you bring down that gavel today, and you say, let's take lunch. I believe you will say that this is unconstitutional. Every single thing that we have ever done in this Senate, he has said is unconstitutional. We have not done a thing yet that is not unconstitutional for the Honourable Senator. Mr. Speaker, he also came over as the biggest astrologist, the biggest psychic in Barbados, because he was able to tell us in his own words that if we had allowed the IMF to negotiate it for us, to decide for us what kind of arrangement and agreement we would have, that they would have given us better terms than we negotiated for ourselves. Very, very entertaining. I don't know if you think, Mr. Speaker, that people like Dr. Maskell and Kevin Greenwich and those would just sit down around a table with a rum and coke and decide on what kind of arrangement we would have. Sir, these people would have... These people, sir, he might be punch drunk by now. These people, sir, would have studied other IMF arrangements. They would not just say, this is it. They would have studied IMF arrangements and know precisely what Barbados could achieve and how much Barbados could bear. They agreed to it for us. But, you know, sir, just by way of illustration, I recall when I just started to teach at Princess Margaret School. And we went to cricket aside. And there was a particular cricketer who we thought should not be on the team. In fact, the whole of Barbados knew that he should not be on the team, but he was selected by the selectors. And he came out to bat. Missed the first, missed the second. About the third or fourth ball, he was back in the pavilion. To make matters worse, later in the evening, when he was now on the field, he was feeling in front of the Kensington stand. Catch came to him. He went under it, dropped through his hands. And everybody started to boo and to behave badly. And you know, sir, there was one fella. He waited on, there was a lull. And he walked down to the fence and he looked over at him. And he told him, he said, I almost got the fella's name. He said, let me tell you something. Don't mind them. You don't got nothing to be ashamed about. You don't got to hold down your head. It ain't your fault. It is the selector's fault. Because you shouldn't be out there in the first place. And I would just be asking, pick sense from that. Pick sense from that. You know, I have noticed, sir, that when that particular senator comes to this chamber, and you can get smiles from all around, he has attacked the Democratic Labour Party. He's called them the worst things in the world. He attacked the BLP when it suits him. They're the worst things in the world. He has no loyalty to any party or to anybody, not even Papa John or Papa Joe. No loyalty to anybody, none. And sir, no, he wants the reputation that he is the most militant. He is the most militant unionist in Barbados. That is what he wants. He's a bottle without a label. A bottle without a label. And Mr. President, I know what is implicit in this statement. I know what is implicit in this statement. If I had the majority, if I had greater numbers, I would march. I know what that means. And I know who is trying to sell themselves. I know what that means. Somebody wants numbers. Numbers don't stop you from marching. Guts, you need guts to march. You need guts to march, not numbers. And let me tell you, march and the numbers will follow you. March and the numbers will come. I heard someone say, and someone that all of us in here know very well, I heard that person say, I will march.
On a point of...
Even if I march alone.
Mr. President, I rise on a point of order in relation to the standing orders, contents of speeches, section 34 in relation to 5, imputation of improper motives to any member. Now, while we do appreciate the vigorous condemnation and protection of a side, we, the independent senators, would like to preserve the the integrity of the debate, and I think that Senator Greenidge is speaking very well, but we are approaching a scope where there's we're getting an actual breach of 34.5, Mr. President, in terms of the imputation of improper motives, sir. And on that point, sir, we just wish to draw it to the President's attention.
Thank you, Senator. Maybe you forgot that he's no longer down below where not to a larger degree, even though there's a comparable standing order. I think the Senator needs to move on.
Yes. So I was saying, sir, that I know of a person that all of us know very well who said, I will march even if I march alone. You need the numbers. In fact, sir, if Senator Boyce wants me to, no, if you want me to go to my logical conclusion, I will. Because if I was making that statement on behalf of myself, I would say I would march even if I march alone. So please, I beg you, want to give me the numbers. That's how I would finish it. That's how I would finish it. You see, sir, there's been 2 speeches this morning that mention patriotism. And I believe that you should be asking yourself not what the workers can do for you, and not what Barbados can do for you, not what this, but what you can do for the workers and what you can do for the country. I am just in a very, I almost say subtle, but there's nothing subtle about it. I am just saying, be as responsible as Senator Drake's. And when you make your speeches in here, all of us, we can sound like Senator Drake's. We can let people know that we love our country. As I said earlier, I'm a literary person. Look, there is Julius Caesar play Love So Well. And Brutus in that play, I remember he said, who is here so vile that will not love his country? If any speak, for him have I offended. Who is here so vile that will not love his country? If any speak, for him have I offended. Sometimes you have to forget yourself and think country. Forget self. And sometimes when we keep overdoing the shouting and the hollering, people forget that we're there after a while. A fellow at law school didn't like me. A fellow lived next door to me, a Jamaican fellow. He always had his music when he was studying, up to the top brass, up top, all the decibels you can imagine. And poor Cappy there can't read a word. And I had to devise a system to use when I was studying. And I wouldn't say it now, I devised a system and shut him up altogether. I didn't even hear the music after a while. Sometimes when you shout loud, people find ways of not listening to you. No prime minister, sir, Mr. President, no prime minister in this world who was handed a good batting wicket would even think of laying off persons 5 months after coming to office. This kind of restructuring that we are doing, someone had described it as austerity. It is going to take her roughly till the end of her term to accomplish anything. You have to have a lot of guts and determination to be doing these things that you are doing, knowing full well that sooner or later you have to account for every single thing that is done. And people will say, lay off people. So you're not going to come into office and in the twinkling of an eye, you talk about people going home. Laying off people is hard. When we came into office in 94, I remember quickly after that, we had to find a way to pay back an 8% that was taken from the public workers. And we did it. So we are not anti-government.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. That statement is misleading the House. The 8% haircut did not, the repayment of the 8% haircut didn't happen in that first term at all. It happened after the next election when you're looking for votes. The only thing, I was trying not to interrupt you, but because you were entertaining too. But when you get facts, you're going to mislead the House, because I listened to you. And I was saying to myself, the weapons that you were using against me, they're not new. The point of order is that I was misleading the House, but I'm getting a little bit more. And I'm saying, Judges 1414, they're alluded to the same weapon.
Order is not a speech, please.
Thanks for the correction. Thanks for the correction. The Barbados Labour Party paid back the 8% that the DLP had taken away from the public workers. And coming on to that though, I'll say this, thanks for the connection. I want Barbados to realize that when Sir Lloyd asked a few years ago, how did we get here? Mayor Motley was not Prime Minister of Barbados. Mayor Motley was not Prime Minister of Barbados. And when we became the third worst, the country with the third worst debt ratio, put it that way, in the world, Mayor Motley was not Prime Minister of Barbados. But the job is ours now. The job is ours now to turn the economy around and make, as Trump said, make Barbados strong again. The job is ours. And I'm going to tell you one thing. We are going to do it. We are going to do it. I want Barbados to realize too that this is not Mayor Motley's problem. This is not Mayor Motley's problem. This is our problem. This is our problem. There's some people who are tunnel visioned. Tunnel visioned to the extent that they don't see light at the end of the tunnel. The only thing they see at the end of the tunnel is one person's face. The face of our Prime Minister, Mayor Motley. And they believe that when this country, when we have turned around this economy, that she is the person who is going to get the credit for having turned around the economy. But the international community is not going to say so. The regional community is not going to say so. The lending agencies wouldn't say so. They will all say that Barbadians made the sacrifice and Barbadians have been able to turn their fortunes around. Too many people see this as the Mayor Motley thing. And that is not true. That is not so. And I know some people would not like it. Kevin Greenwich has told us that because of the steps that we are taking, that our credit rating should rise by year end. I believe it. Standard & Poor's, they have downgraded us once again. But they have advised us that because of the steps that we are taking, that our credit rating should rise again. The last administration, they gave us, 22 downgrades. Downgrades in the same direction. Down. And now there's hope. There's a little hope. And when today anyone speaks in Barbados with confidence, with conviction about our credit rating, it should be music to our ears to hear credit rating will rise. But that is not going to be music to everybody's ears. It's not good music to everybody's ears. A large number of Barbadians, sir, have confidence in this administration and what it is doing. Senator Adams made a statement last week that I liked a lot. I made a note of it. He said, this bill will unlock further confidence. That is the way he put it. Senator Springer this morning said the same thing. The word is confidence. And Barbados will be opened once again for business. And these measures, sir, are aimed at providing the country with an investment culture. And it is happening because our Prime Minister has surrounded herself with competent professionals who can provide her with good, sound advice. There will still be naysayers. You can't get away from it. You will still have naysayers. And the naysayers can smile. But I have every confidence in her ability and her team's ability to grow this economy. As I said, these are certificated people. People who know what it takes to get a country out of the mess. As I close, sir, I've said that there will be persons who will want, yes, there are persons in Barbados who today will want this country to fail. They will want the Barbados Labour Party to fail. There are persons who will want Mayor Motley to fail. They're saying we're rushing and doing this thing too fast. The last administration appeared to be scared to do some of the things that we are doing, some of the things that had to be done. And this present government is confident about what it is doing and about how it is doing it. And I can say to you up front, yes, sir, Mr. President, we know that we have time limits. We know that we have targets to meet. We have reports to make at precise times. And if we fail to achieve our goals, Mr. President, some of the same critics who are criticizing us now will say that we failed because we were procrastinating. We are working. We are working. Every delay puts you on a worse bargaining trajectory, a worse bargaining position. Our aim is to get out of a bad place. Our aim is to get from where we are. The IMF money, sir, may not even be a lot in the whole scheme of things, but it frees up money, sir, from other sources. And that is very important. And sir, Mr. President, I support the bill wholeheartedly, and I'm sure that the senator will commend me once again on the speech I made this morning. He commended me once, and I know he'll commend me again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Griggs. I now recognize Senator Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise after the speech given by Senator Greenidge. And since we are grading speeches, I would have to say that Senator Greenidge has delivered an A-class presentation today. Even though he said some things that inevitably were difficult to hear, they needed to be said. And I want to start my presentation, which will cover three main things. One, I'm going to address the question of whether or not the government of Barbados, led by Mia Amor Motley as our Prime Minister, is indeed rushing this program. Then I'm going to move on to deal with two issues that my colleagues have already started to treat with. One, the question of confidence, and two, the question of a national consciousness. Now, the Barbados Labour Party manifesto for the May 24th election this year spoke extensively about national consciousness, and I'm going to weave some of those issues into the discussion today, largely because, one, they're important, and two, because our colleagues have already spoken to them specifically by talking about patriotism. But I'm going to start on the question of whether or not we are rushing. And in order to address the question of whether we are rushing this program and ramming it down the throats of Barbadians and getting it through the system in a hurry, I want to tell a tale of two countries. Two countries that in 2010, when the Inter-American Development Bank, the Economic Commission of Latin America, the World Bank, and every single developing agency was writing on our economic performance, they wrote several things. In 2010, the IDB said that the economy at the time, we're talking in this instance of Barbados and Grenada, we walked very similar paths for the last 10 years. And oftentimes, when we discuss in the public space many of these issues, we talk about the last 10 years and the last decade. And that is true and that is important. But we're talking here now about rushing to find remedial solutions. And for that purpose, I start at the point of 2013. 2013, because between 2009 and 2010, these entities were writing about our countries in very unflattering terms. They described us as having, in Grenada, 0.7% growth in 2009 and becoming one of the most heavily indebted countries in the world. As a result, Grenada was facing all kinds of socio-economic challenges, and the results of those socio-economic challenges that resulted from increasing poverty, increases in crime, increases in unemployment, increases in underemployment, poor health, those kinds of socio-economic issues. The scenario in Barbados in 2010 was equal to that in Grenada. We had even lower growth rates than Grenada at 0.2%. That was in 2010. In 2013, we had an election in February. If the government of the day in 2013 had made the decisions that are being made now 5 years later in 2018 by the Barbados Labour Party administration, we would not be here. We would not be in this position. And I say that simply because in 2013, when we went to the polls, we had a discussion about the state of the economy. We started to raise the red flags. We started to talk about all the indicators that were going in the wrong direction. We started to talk about all of the challenges that all of our sectors were facing. We started to see the levels of unemployment rising. As we were measuring poverty, we were seeing the Gini coefficient going in the wrong direction and trending downwards. We were having this discussion around credit downgrades, of course, yes. And we had a population that said in some instances, and a group among us that said, Kadir, let me try this. Don't do this. You don't want nobody to go home. We don't want layoffs. We don't want to privatize. We don't want to look at some of these entities. Kadir. And we lived in Kadir mode for 5 years. 5 more years. Until we are here now. Is it that the people on the other side who would want to have us not push through this program want us to continue to say Kadir? Or do we have to find the time, finally, 5 years after when we should have started this, to actually get the job done? How can the government be accused of rushing a program that is 5 years overdue, at best? And it is not to say that we're talking about the government as an institution on its own. We all live in Barbados. This is not a Barbados Labour Party issue. This is not a Democratic Labour Party issue. This is not a third-party issue, and it is the reason why I say I identify very strongly with the words, with the comments made by Senator Greenidge and by others. This is a Barbados issue. When we go to the supermarket, the prices don't differentiate based on which party we support. When we have to get health care, the doctors don't differentiate when they invoice us based on which party we support. When we travel around the world, and I remember sitting in a cafe in Jamaica 2 years ago, again identifying with Senator Greenidge, where a person took me to breakfast because I was in Jamaica for meetings and said to me, "What is happening in Barbados, Lisa?" And I am sure, if we are honest, that we accept that all of us have had that experience in the last decade, but most certainly in the last 5 years. What is happening in Barbados? People kept asking us. And he said something to me that broke my heart. It broke my heart. He said to me, he has Barbados paper. And his financial advisors are calling him and telling him, get rid of it. Barbados is no longer a good place to do business or to have money. Do you know how I felt? As a proud Barbadian who has always been a champion of our economic management, to hear in Jamaica financial advisors saying of Barbados, get rid of our paper. But yet we are being accused of rushing through a program like this. Is that what we are comfortable hearing? Are we really saying that to our children and our grandchildren, that that is okay? That that is a standard for us? No, I cannot accept that. I do not believe that. That is not who we are. This program needed to be done 5 years ago in 2013, and I am commending the Barbados Labour Party under the Mia Motley-led administration for having the guts not to focus on protecting a political wicket because you were afraid of the fallout, because you were afraid of how the public would respond. Grenada in 2013 made these decisions because they knew they had 5 clear years to make tough choices, show results, and get the economy back on a solid footing, and the people went with them. What are we saying to Barbadians? And there's another reason why Senator Greenidge's comments are important to me. Because when we listen to Barbadians, Barbadians expect us in the Senate and in the other place to lead by example. They expect us to have substantive contributions. They expect us to demonstrate that the education that has been invested in us by the taxpayers that went before us has been put to good use, and that we have clear analytical capability and we bring substance to the table. When we grandstand in this space, those who don't fully understand some of these issues, because let us be truthful, credit downgrades, debt restructuring, bonds, debentures, those are not terms that the average Barbadian, in some instances affected by these things, are fully familiar with. So we make matters worse by confusing Barbadians, by using this space to grandstand, because you know what happens? The media will capture the things that are the sound bites, and that is what gets carried. And the more substantive contributions, like those by Senator Drakes and those by Senator Boyce and others, and of course those by Senator Haynes, those things don't necessarily get carried. But the hype and the grandstanding, that's what gets carried. And that is what is reflected of this Senate. And that is not what we stand for. That is not what this moment requires of us. This moment in time is a watershed moment for Barbados. And we have to be serious and approach it with a sense of national responsibility, national consciousness, and put partisan and all other alliances aside and say, this is a moment for Barbados. I am a Barbadian and I am in this for my country. That's what we have to do. And so this program is not being rushed. It is necessary. I also agree with the sentiments that we have a capable economic team. And I say that now in the context that there was a lament in the previous administration that rather than surround themselves with skilled professionals with international exposure and so on, they prioritized those who were loyal to the party. And we're not necessarily the best equipped to do what was needed, and perhaps that's part of the reason we are here now. Now we have brought in international expertise, and one of the things that I had to say, I said on the floor, I said to a colleague just last night, one of the things that I publicly have to commend the Prime Minister of this country for is that she, in all she has done, and despite all the criticism that she knows she will face for it, she has surrounded herself not only with the party faithful, but with the capable and the competent wherever they come from. And that is putting Barbados first, because this is that moment. This is that time. She's not uncomfortable by criticism. She's not uncomfortable with disagreements. She wants what is best for Barbados, and she has brought those who are capable of doing just that together in all different incarnations. And that is the example that we have to set. We have to do what is best for Barbados. And so the story of Grenada continued to the extent where, the efforts made by Grenada in 2013 saw that between 2013 and 2017, we've been hearing from Dr. Greenidge and Dr. Maskell about policy space. Policy space, in simple terms, simply means that you currently have enough money to be able to pay your debts and to invest in some of the activities, the programs and projects that are required. Simple oversimplification of policy space. Here's what Grenada's actions in 2013 resulted in. The World Bank gave them $9.4 million. Caribbean Development Bank gave them $10 million. And the European Union, in direct budgetary support, gave Grenada $28 million. Between 2013 and 2017, Grenada saw around $192 million flowing into their economy in direct budgetary support, grants, and in loans. That allowed Grenada, by 2017, when the last reports came out, to go from having a growth rate of 0.7% to a growth rate of 5.5%. That is what action, intervention in the market does. Kadir doesn't take you there. Delaying doesn't take you there. You just have to suck it up. You have to get in there. You have to put your back into it. And you have to do it. We have to do this as a country. This is not the moment for anything other than that. And that brings me to the points that I wanted to make around confidence and national consciousness. Mr. President, when Barbados is able again to pay its bills on time, when we are once again able to benefit from credit upgrades and no longer downgrades, investors see that. If you were to look at the investment flows into the region and into Barbados over the last 5 years, they are pitiful. We have not been able to attract investment into this country in any meaningful way in the absence of confidence. What we have demonstrated with this program and the speed of this program and the extent of this program is that we are ensuring that there is a return of confidence in this economy. That we are once again signaling to the world that the notion that Barbados's money and Barbados's paper is no good will no longer be allowed to stand. And that Barbados is a place to do business. That is what we are signaling. We are not Kadiring our way out of this. We have to suck it up. And that is not about anything other than us making a commitment at the policy level. This is not an easy thing. Sending home workers is a painful, terrible thing. I watched the Prime Minister. I know all of you did. Many of you saw the same things I saw. The burden she carries is not a light one. The burden that the ministers who have had to sit across from their senior managers and talk through who is going home and the decisions that have to be made is not a light one. I am a manager. I head a company. I know what it is to sit across from someone and people and say, we cannot continue with your employment. I said this morning in my own space on my Facebook page that the first time that I had to do it, I wanted to go home, crawl into my bed, pull my covers over my head and weep. This is no light thing. Nobody would enjoy doing what we are doing here. But what I can tell you is this. There are no ministers pulling any list to go through to see who's from their constituency in this retrenchment. There's no minister sending out lists from his constituency to see who is from his constituency and who's not so that we can choose who's going home. That's not what's happening here. That is not what is happening in this moment. There is an overall rationalization that is taking place by post and not by person. The government of Barbados is not sending home people only to rehire other persons who are their supporters. That is not what is happening here. We're making national choices, difficult, painful national choices that the Democratic Labour Party did not have the guts to make 5 years ago.
That's right.
And so this is a moment for national consciousness. Senator Greenidge said, we have to ask not what we can do for our country, but what our country can do for us. Last week, I was in Canada on university meetings, and I was in discussions with someone who I met. And as we know, Canada has an excellent social welfare infrastructure, but they also have a high tax rate. And the guy said to me something that I have never heard in my life anywhere. He said, I love paying my taxes. I said, what are you talking about? No one loves paying taxes. You pay taxes because you have to. I want to differentiate between what is happening under this administration and what happened elsewhere. When taxes are collected by the state overall, they go towards the provision of services. The state does not do any business. The state does not trade. The state earns its revenue only from the collection of different types of taxes. And those taxes are used to provide common services. Health care, roads, lighting, education, putting books in our schools. We, like Canada, have an exceptional social care system. We have an education system that has birthed all of us. We have a health care system that has taken care of all of us. We have free dental care up to age 18. Those things come as a result of taxation. And the gentleman in Canada who was talking about how he loves taxes was saying so because he expects that when he goes into a hospital, he's able to access medical care without delay. He expects that when he sends his children to school, he doesn't have to pay for private school because the public schools are excellent and are capable of delivering a world-class education. He expects that when his children go and they need dental care, they have world-class dental care, and that industries are developed and that there are support services like Business Development Canada focusing on entrepreneurship and so on, because there is taxation. There is a difference between what is happening now and what happened then. What happened then was that we saw the increase in taxes exponentially over and over and over again, but we could not see the returns from those taxes. Taxes are meant to be used for a purpose. And when people could not go to a hospital and access medical care, and when doctors could not access even syringes and sutures, you have a problem. Where are your taxes going? That's not what is happening here. With taxation, we have had an increase, we have had the return of free tertiary level education for all Barbadians to the University of the West Indies. With taxation, we are seeing roadworks, which people are already complaining about. You can't win. You must have the roadworks, but you don't want them. That is what happens with taxes. We are having lighting being installed in some places that are dangerous. You have understaffed offices that need support. That is what happens with taxes. So people do love taxes, yes, but most of us hate to pay taxes, but we want the services. And I'm saying to Barbadians in this moment, this is a moment for national consciousness, where you ask not what you can do, what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, not with anything else, but in this moment, your sacrifice. Your sacrifice and your patriotism. That's what we are here for. And so with those words, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, with those words, I give my full support to this debt restructuring program. I don't love paying taxes. I don't love the sacrifices that are being made. I don't like the inconvenience of road works, but I understand the importance of them to country. And country must come first. Country must be our priority, Mr. President. And with those words, I'm obliged and I give my support to the bill.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. I think the last speech before we take the lunch break will be Senator Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. Of course, that puts me on the spot to make sure that I'll be trying to be as short as possible. But I rise, sir, to add my voice to this debate on the debt holder bill that is before the House at this time. As a priest and, of course, as a minister of religion, when I give consideration to the bills that come before this honorable chamber, my first reference point is that of searching my faith, searching my moral and biblical teachings to discern what is possibly God's will, what is right, what is just and of good practice as we debate the adjustment bills that come before us. And so I am not here debating the economic side of this particular bill, but more so seeking to come from a moral standpoint. And I could recall, sir, that in one of my previous contributions here, right in this honorable chamber, that dealt with the tax clearance certificate, I would have made a reference to that familiar exhortation of rendering to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. When, of course, during that very debate, we would have been encouraging the general populace to continue, of course, to be committed to paying their taxes, even although we are giving them removing the need for the tax clearance for various businesses. In terms of this bill that is now before the House, for some reason that came back to mind, but more so I was reminded of a portion of scripture from Romans 13 and verse 8 that I would have shared sometime last year with my congregational family there at Holy Trinity. And this verse in the NIV translation reads as follows. It says, "Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law." I, however, sir, prefer the more modern translation that puts it like this. It says, "Pay your debts as they come due. However, one debt you can never finish repaying is the debt of love that you owe each other." Mr. Deputy President, these are some very profound words that come from the Apostle Paul, words that I believe every single individual, every partnership, every business, and even every government needs to hear and consider well. The only debt, Paul says, we never finish repaying is that of love and concern for our fellow human beings. But on the contrary, he says all other debt that becomes due ought to be paid. Could or should such a biblical principle be applicable as our guide even in this debate, or is this exhortation of Paul null and void when it comes to today's economics and the reality in which we indeed find ourselves as a nation and as a country? That's the question that I really raise in my reflection on this debate that is before the House. Whether indeed, because of the fact that we have already defaulted on our external debt payments, and now in the process of seeking the passage of a bill that will, in essence, suspend or default internal debt payments as well, maybe spreading it across a 15-year lifespan. Well, my faith tells me that this principle of repaying debt when it is due is still, of course, an ideal position that all of us should take, that of honoring our promises and commitments made to our creditors. But, Mr. Deputy President, it is clear, according to the stats presented and, of course, the message that is conveyed by our current government, that such is not possible at this time. And I would say that the reason, of course, why we find ourselves in such a predicament is simply the fact that we have been living beyond our means. And therefore, we are now faced with a debt to GDP ratio of well over 150%. This surely is a sad state of affairs that indeed our current government has inherited. But be that as it may, the government has to take the necessary compassionate measures to address the turmoil within our economy at this time. And so the promises made even by the former administration still need to be met. Current government needs to meet that debt. Now the bill, sir, as I understand it, seeks essentially to bind all persons, all instrument holders of government debentures, treasury notes, treasury bills, and other debt instruments, excluding the saving bonds, to this restructuring of their instruments so long as a specified supermajority of the instrument holders, the current instrument holders, vote in favor of such a debt restructuring proposal. As reported last week by our leader of government business here within the Senate, and also, of course, as you would have heard in the news, that super majority of votes have already been achieved. Some 90%, or maybe even more, because I thought I was hearing something like 99, but some 90% of instrument holders, at least that was what was reported last week. And now it is up to us here in this honorable chamber to determine the fate of all instrument holders, whether or not they fall within that 90% or that 10%. Mr. Deputy President, let me say up front, I don't own any instruments at this time. Mine was able to mature before this time. But I do, however, find myself standing in solidarity with that minor group, that latter percentage of investors, that 10%, who no doubt would have entered, as again would have been stated last week, who would have entered in good faith, with the assurance that they will be able to have their principal and expected interest by a specific date or year, and who may have already had specific plans for that money that they have set aside. The 90% who have agreed to such a restructuring may find themselves in a better position, and so they can readily or easily accept the proposal by the government and make such a sacrifice as offered within the restructuring proposals. But the 10%, Mr. Deputy President, the majority of whom may very well be pensioners, as we have been arguing the case for the pensioners, may not be able to consider such a restructuring of their own investment that may very well need some of that very money early next year. Who knows? And so I stand this afternoon for the voice, to be the voice for the voiceless, who find themselves bound by a debt restructuring plan that could very well affect their mortgage payments, could very well affect their rent payments, other loan payments, could very well affect a possibility of having an operation the end of this year, could very well affect some of their children who may be overseas at this time. And they may have needed that very money to assist them with the continuation of their education. Will they be able to suspend their debt payments? You know, Mr. President, that 10% of instrument holders, and I re-emphasize, entered a contract with the government, and we are now seeking to, in essence, pass a bill that will take away their contractual rights to request their monies due to them at the time that was stated within the original instrument. It takes away some of the terms of agreement under which they would have entered faithfully that contract. I have serious problems with that. Indeed, I admire, as again is being conveyed even during this session, the patriotism of the 90%, who have the ability to agree with the terms offered by the government to help save this nation as it is in a critical state of economic peril. But I believe that not everyone can afford such a sacrifice. And a just and fair society, Mr. Deputy President, needs to be ever mindful of those individuals and what they are going through. They may be vulnerable. The government, the caring government, should never assume that everyone has the means or the wherewithal to go without their investment for the next year or so, though they're being guaranteed the full principal and interest paid by the end of the 15 years. What is amazing, Mr. Deputy President, is that government has been, during the last administration, on the CLICO's issue and British American. But particularly, I make reference to the situation that we would have been hearing a lot about CLICO, in the case about making the default payments owed to the trustful citizens of this nation, calling earnestly on that cash-strapped company to service its indebtedness to the investments made by Barbadians and businesses. But now the tables are turned. We are expecting to bind a small percentage of government investors to terms they do not want to accept and did not initially agree to. You know, when we go, say, for a 5-year loan from the banking institution with a fixed interest rate and terms of making that repayment over those 5 years, if we get laid off from our work, we can't go and tell the bank that we will repay when next we get a job. We can't go and tell the bank that we are going to change the terms of the loan that they have given us to extend it to 15 years rather than a 5-year loan, and that we are going to reduce the payment of the interest that we are giving them. We can't go back to the bank and say that we don't have a job any longer, and the bank either have to take the terms that we are offering or lose every cent and write us off as bad debts. Certainly the bank will start looking at the securities that we signed on in the agreement. They will look at the car, the land, the house, and also start looking for a lawyer to take the necessary steps in order to redeem the money we owe. All I'm saying, Mr. Deputy President, is that as much as I understand the need of this debt restructuring, I believe that the 10% should have their right to what the original terms of agreement for the instruments had stated, and not to be forced to surrender what they may very well desperately need at this time. Even though Senator Walker would have alluded to the fact that there is this collective clause agreement that can be used in this case to bind even the 10% so long as this bill is passed. As naive or as simplistic as this may sound, Mr. Deputy President, my position is that persons' freedom of choice should not be taken away in this regard in relation to money promised and owed to them. As much as we may believe that it is indeed good for the greater good, good for all, in my opinion, it is a moral obligation of any borrower, including the government, to pay its debt when it is due, unless, of course, the investor or the loaner freely consents to some other debt restructuring instrument, as is the case for the 90%. That being the case, I do have some reservation in supporting this bill as it stands with its collective action clause expressed in Section 5 of subsection 2 that reads on page 6 as follows, where it says that where the voting threshold specified in paragraph A and B of subsection 1 are obtained, the restructuring proposal shall be deemed to be accepted, whether or not some instrument holders voted against the restructuring proposals or declined to exercise their right to vote. I stand, Mr. Deputy President, hand in hand with the minority to champion their cause. The 10% who, in my independent opinion, if justice is to be served, have every right to request of the government the repayment of their instruments under the former agreement, if their circumstances seem dire. Because I don't believe that they're just standing out to be against the government, because I believe that they too, that 10%, has a national conscience as well. But I believe they're standing up because they had other obligations as well that are probably urgent, and so they need to have their investments. And so I believe it is indeed a good government will indeed take that into consideration of the 10%, and if it is the case that you have to meet with them and assist them in it. But indeed, that they should be considered even as we are passing this bill, or seeking to pass this bill today. And so with those words, Mr. Deputy President, I'm obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator Maxwell.
Mr. Deputy President, I beg that this sitting be now suspended for 1 hour for lunch.
Question is that this sitting be now suspended for 1 hour for lunch. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please. The ayes have it.